Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 3 of season 6 of My Hero Academia. I woke up this morning, tried to do something with my hair, failed miserably, and then said, screw it, I'm watching My Hero Academia. Because, yeah, the last 2 episodes have been great. Season 6 is off to a great start. Kaminari, him and Mirko were just going at it last episode. Not at each other, but at the villains. And so it was a really good episode. We got some shipping with Jiro and Kaminari established. Mirko was great. I'm really, really excited that we're just going in full steam with this episode to see where we go. Because like I said in the last episode, I've intentionally not read the manga again to know what's coming next. I'll know when we see it, but it'll be a surprise when it happens. Because I'm trying to remember, I remember certain plot points and I'm like, okay, I know that's going to happen. And then that's going to happen. But where it happens in the story is a bit fuzzy. So I don't quite remember, right? So I poured myself some coffee and I was like, I am just totally ready to immerse myself in my new morning ritual, my Saturday morning ritual of waking up and watching My Hero Academia. Because I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. It comes out on Saturday mornings. And so here where I am in the US. And so I'm like, okay, wake up, watch My Hero, have it ready to go by Monday. Should be a good time, right? And then the only exception is I know that in a few weeks I'll be like out another like weekend. And so that I'll probably not be able to watch that until Sunday or Monday, so that episode may come out late on Patreon, but for YouTube it'll be out on time, so there's that. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this series so far for this season, and I'm excited to see where all it goes. So we'll see what we have to talk about with this episode. So I've not been looking at any of the previews or anything like that because I'm like, I don't need to. It's going to just come. And plus, I want it to be somewhat surprising when we get to it. So I've not been looking. I know some people said that they were like on Twitter, they had the preview stills and stuff. And I'm like, I'll just wait till it comes out. So it'll be fine. But yeah, let's not waste any more time, shall we? We are going to dive right into My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 3. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. R.I.P. twice. I didn't realize we were getting to this part 3 episodes into the season. Oh my god, I didn't realize we were getting this close, that we were this close to it all going down. So yeah. So the contents of this episode, if you are not a manga reader and were just thrown into this and you're like, what? Welcome to how we felt for like an entire month, for like the whole month when these chapters were coming out, we were like, what? Because yeah, things jump up a notch. Yeah. And it almost comes out of nowhere, right? It doesn't come out of nowhere because we've seen the foundation was laid, right? You had Hawks infiltrating. You knew Hawks was a double agent. Hawks had been watching Twice. He knew how dangerous Twice was. But at this point in the story, I feel like the manga makes a very decisive turn and is like, no. Because, it's one thing for the Nomu to get taken out because the Nomu are technically already dead. They're just corpses that have been reanimated. So we don't, as the audience, feel like we're like, oh, well, they're clearly villainous and they're not alive, so they're monsters. They just, they don't even really have a soul anymore. It's just going off these memories that are inside of them. So yeah, destroy them. That seems of no consequence, right? And the villains, like even Overhaul, who did horrible things to Eri and so many other characters, he gets kind of just taken to prison, right? He just kind of comes quietly. But that's the thing. Overhaul gives up. Like at the very end, Overhaul is defeated and he gives up. And Shigaraki takes his arms and then he's kind of just left in this state. But Twice doesn't give up. And like Hawk says, the worst kind of villains are the ones that don't give up. They keep going, right? And at this point, it seems like the manga makes a decisive turn. And Horikoshi makes a very big decision in saying, no, we're going to kill off a major villain. And there was, the blood and everything at the end of this episode, it pretty much leaves it up. There was a while where several of us reading the manga were like, did Hawks kill Twice? Did this just happen? And then by the end of the manga, it's like, by the end of this episode, it's like, no, he did. He did. And I will say that it does seem like in this episode, like it happens very quickly, but in the manga, it happens very quickly. So the pacing and everything, they don't give you time. The manga did not give you time. I mean, maybe since we were watching it, reading it week to week, you had a little time to process, but in the moment when you think of the pacing, it's like, no, this is what's happening. We're only 3 episodes in. I was like, we're already getting this 3 episodes in. Oh my God. But yeah, this episode, and we'll talk a bit in the spoiler corner, but now I'm happy I can talk about it now, because I've wanted to talk about it since last season, especially with Twice being like, Hawks and Twice, and now we're here. So I'm excited to finally talk about it with y'all and not be spoilery. But this episode and this point in the manga had a lot of people in a very decisive state, because it's like, you are either, I remember reading the manga and everybody was either Team Twice or Team Hawks, and they were like, there was a lot of people that hated Twice after this episode. A lot of people, because they liked Twice. They hated Hawks after this episode because they liked Twice so much. And it's hard. It is hard because there is this episode, One's Justice. I love the title of it and the title of that chapter, because I instantly think of All for One and One for All. It's either all the power for one individual, or it's one individual fighting for all. But in either case, it's like, what is that one person's justice? Right? And you have, it kind of deals with both sides of the coin. You have the villain's justice and the hero's justice. And they both do have points. And they talk about it, and then we have this conversation. And I think Horikoshi is trying to make the point that they're all human and all making decisions. But there is something to what Twice says that's important. And then there's something to what Hawk says that's important. So I want to go through this episode because, man, I love this so much. So yeah, we do the recap. It's only like 2 minutes. It's not bad. And then we do the intro. They don't let you skip this intro. They are bound and determined if you're going to watch the My Hero Academia thing. Now I'm glad we can talk about the OP. Everything with Hawks and Dabi and Twice in that OP. Whenever I first saw it in episode 1, I was like, but yeah, we're already here. I thought it was going to be, I couldn't remember where in the manga we got to Twice versus Hawks. I thought it was a little bit later, but no, it's right here. So there's that. But yeah. And then Hawks with all the feathers. I will say they animated this really well. The manga's gorgeous. Sad Man's Parade in the manga is gorgeous, but they animated Hawks and those feathers and the lighting and the voice acting. The voice acting is what got me in this episode. Like Twice and Hawks voice actors, they did it justice in my opinion. Twice especially, but Hawks being the cold and emotionless. Because here's the thing. At the end of the day, Hawks is a trained mercenary. Hawk was trained by the government in the Hero Society. He's been trained to take people out if needed. And they were like, you need to take Twice out. And Hawks is like, yeah, Twice is dangerous. And Twice is easily for a cause. And so if he gets his mind wrapped around the League of Villains, which he has, then he's going to do whatever he can to help them. And Hawks is like, we can't let him do that. And so... yeah, it's funny because a lot of people were mad at Hawks, and I'm like, well, he's a trained mercenary. This came with the job. He's a double agent. He's not afraid to do this, right? And it shouldn't surprise us, but it's funny because Hawks has put on this persona the whole time of being like that, like, I'm just happy-go-lucky, just want everybody to fly free, and I don't think that's wrong. I think he does, but it's funny, his voice actor plays a lot of characters that seem like chipper and optimistic on the outside and have this dark, shady inner darkness. Hawks is no exception, right? God, this OP. But yeah, so I do like a few changes they've made, like they showing Skeptic and the security system, showing how the moment we saw the heroes perched outside of the exits, I was like, oh, are we getting these chapters? I was like, oh wait, is this already time? Is it already time? I felt like, you know, Attack on Titan. Were we doing this right here, right now? We are. It is this episode. I loved the sound design of when we went underground in Gunga Villa. We went underground to where all the Liberation Front is gathered, and it's just eerily quiet. Everything's happening outside, and it's just silent underground. Like, that was such a cool effect. And Redestro! I freaking love Redestro. I said this last season. Redestro is, like, one of my favorite side villains because he's very much like a classic comic book villain, right? He has, like, kind of a vaudeville kind of villainy style to him where he's, like, a salesman, and he's kind of smarmy and kind of, like, sleazy. But then, like, he's for comic relief. But then his power is actually kind of threatening. we'll talk about Tokiyami in that matchup. We will talk about that. But I was so happy with how they did that because we'll talk about it. But he's just a great villain. And I love how in this entire scene, he is trying his hardest to keep quiet and just be like, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Him and Trumpet standing there. And he's like, well, Skeptic's not here. I will say the biggest atrocity of this episode is Redestro's suit choices, because I did public speaking as a competitive event, and you can do pattern on pattern, but not that. Not polka dots. Not mint polka dots. With the mint polka dots with the black and white stripe is not good, but if you had like a black solid tie, that would go fine. You could make that work. But the black pinstripe suit, the mint polka dot shirt, and the olive green tie does not match. Clashes too much. Get out of here. Redestro, what are you doing? But I love that he has a little tiny birthmark spot of stress, but he's just like, everything's fine. We're fine. We're Skeptic. It's fine. Like he's literally the embodiment of the dog with the coffee cup being like, it's fine when everything's burning around him. And I love how he's like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, the heroes have completely trashed camp and there's thousands of them surrounding us and we're all going to die. And Redestro, and then you hear the rumbling and Redestro's like, I just love how he instantly gets stressed. Oh, it's so great. They did that a lot of justice. I love that from the manga. It's great. But yes, Mentos destroying the mansion. That mansion, it's pretty much ruined, right? Pretty much done. And Kaminari's still like absorbing. I will say this. The heroes launch a pretty effective assault in this episode, because Edgeshot, his power is terrifying. I remember reading the manga being like, ugh, like I'm phobic to needles. So the idea that a hero could get tiny and thin enough to pierce inside of you like a needle. I just imagine like his powers are like a giant syringe, like a 3 feet long needle piercing your lung. That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. And so Edgeshot is scary. And the fact that he could pierce all of them at once, like he pierces their lungs. He shoots through them like a bullet and pierces their lungs. And he's like, oh, I opened up a small hole in your lung. Don't worry, if you move too much, it may lead to death. But if you stay still, it'll heal itself quickly. Thank you, Edgeshot. Which to be fair, Midnight follows up and comes in clutch for that moment. Because yeah, the idea is that just if you don't move, you'll heal. But if you move, you'll die. It's like just showing like how serious Edgeshot is. And so, I was thinking this moment, I was like, well, these guys are pumped full of adrenaline, so the chance of them standing still is not likely. They're all going to die. But then Midnight comes in right afterwards with her beautiful fans, and the fans are like to spread around her sleep dust, and she makes them all like fall asleep. So even the one guy who's had his lungs pierced, even him like falls asleep, so he would be able to heal. So that is like the point of the heroes. The heroes incapacitating the villains, but not killing them, right? Because the villains of the Liberation Front, they're trying to kill the heroes. But the heroes in this case, they're like, no, we're not trying to kill anybody. We're just going to incapacitate them and then we'll take them into custody. That's all we're going to do. Even Kamui Woods, who I love Kamui Woods, he like has the lacquered prison. Like I love that all his moves are like named after all the trees in the wood. It's great. But then you contrast that with Hawks, who's like, no, I got to kill you. And it's like, Then we get into a little bit more gray area, right? And so they basically just taking out all the villains at once. And I love that we have Mudman. We have Juko, right? Him being able, Juzo. I always forget Juzo's name. I'm like, Juzo Hananuki. He's Mudman. And he uses that softening power to like make the ground soft so that they all sink and get trapped there in the mud. And then Shimage, our mushroom girl. I love it. I love them working together, right? It's great. And honestly, her powers with the mushrooms are kind of like Midnight's a little bit, where it has like the spores and the dust and everything. But yeah, they work so really good together. It's cute. She's not shipped with Mudman. She's shipped with the one that turns all black. Yeah, that fights in the shadows. That's who she's usually shipped with. I'm wrong. Okay. But yeah, and so everything, even up to this point where the heroes are incapacitated, it feels very much like My Hero Academia, where it's just like, we're fighting the bad guys, comic book, dun, 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 like gang orcas going in. Everything feels very tonally on point, even with like Redestro and everything. There's like a hero that looks like Sonic the Hedgehog running through. It's great. But then we cut to Twice. And at this point in the manga, everybody was like, oh, okay. And he's like, hey, what are we doing, Twice? And him being cornered by the feathers. Like they're all like knives pointed at him. And then we see Hawk standing in the doorway in the shadows. And he's like, what's happening? One's justice. Oh my God. And so Hawks has the tiny little wings because all of his feathers have been taken out. I like that throughout the episode, when he starts gathering his feathers back up, his wings start to regrow. Even when Dobby like has them on fire. It's great. Oh my God. But this whole thing, I've been waiting for this to be animated for a long time. And if my reaction was very quiet, I was just sitting there like wanting to watch, being like, oh my God, we're here. We're finally here. This is happening. I've waited like years to see this animated. And they do it justice. They do one's justice with it. The pacing of it is just like in the manga. And then, yeah, he cuts the tracking device, and Skeptic is instantly like, what? Like, I love Skeptic's like, damn it, Hawks. So they can't see, right? Because here's the thing. They don't want on footage a hero killing anybody. They don't want anybody seeing that Hawks killed Twice, right? Because that would make the heroes look bad. Even though Hawks is like, I've got to do what must be done, you know, what do we do? So the operation this time was limited with numbers. It was to intimidate with numbers. And I didn't want to give you any extra time with your quirk. And Twice, meanwhile, has no clue what's going on. He's like, what? Like, he's still trying to process the fact that Hawks is a double agent. Like, he's still trying to process it while Hawks is, here's the thing that's crazy about it, right? Because it's funny, the subversion in all of this, because Twice almost seems innocent at this point in the episode, because he's just like, he's caught off guard. He's like, what's going on? I thought we were buddies. I thought we were friends. What's this betrayal? And it almost seems like Hawks is villain monologuing, right? He's not. He's explaining the plan to Twice, like how it all went down, because he knows that he's going to kill him. But at the moment, Hawks is just like, it sounds like a villain monologue, right? And I remember people saying that when the chapter came out, they're like, Hawks is monologuing. He's like, I had to keep an eye on you at all times, like revealing the betrayal and like going back. And what makes it so tragic, and the moment you see Hawks like look down at him with those eyes that are like yellow, they look like a bird of prey. They look like a predator. Like this just surrounded Hawks. And he's like, it was totally natural, right? And Twice is like, what's going on? And he's like, and he tells him not to put up a fight. He's like, I'll restrain you and hand you over to the police. Like, if you just keep calm, we'll do this, right? And Twice is just like hyperventilating, just like, oh my God. And the thing that Hawks doesn't realize is that Twice is thinking back to Overhaul. And he's thinking about how, because he brought Overhaul to that meeting, because he did that, Magni died. Because his friend died, because he brought Overhaul in and trusted him, right? Because he did that. And because he brought Overhaul in, Compress lost his arm, his friends were hurt, and it was because of him. And he's like, this is all, he's like, that guy killed Big Sis Mag. He's like, he blew away Mr. Compress's arm. And see Mr. Compress with this frown face mask. I remember that part. He's like, it's my fault. I want to take responsibility. He's like, let me take responsibility for it. And he's like, this always happens. It always turns out like this. And it's the saddest thing, because it's like Twice, he's like, I can't trust anybody, because when I bring people in that I trust, it ends up hurting others, right? And so there is a part where you kind of understand where Twice is coming from. To Hawks' credit, he is saying, like, if you come quietly, I'll take you to the police and we don't have to do this. Like, if you just come quietly, we'll get out of here. But there's so much logistically with that too. Like I felt like reading the manga because everybody was either like Team Hawks, Team Twice, and I felt like I was like devil's advocate in the middle because you see where both sides are coming from. On the one hand, yeah, it's good that Hawks like, if you just come quietly, we'll avoid all this. And someone could argue, well, they're in the middle of this big battle. Is Hawks just gonna leave the fray with Twice and do nothing else, and that's it? Like, he's not gonna help out in any way? How's that logistically gonna work? How's he gonna subdue Twice while also helping everybody else out? What is that gonna look like? Was he really going to do that? Or, some people were like, no, Hawks was gonna kill him all along. He was never gonna take him into custody. Or some people said, well, Hawks knew he was going to put up a fight no matter what, so him just saying that was hollow. So it's hard to determine, not knowing, because Twice doesn't try to comply, it's hard to know where it would have gone, right? Would Hawks have really taken him to the police and done nothing? I think Hawks wanted to do that. Now, whether that was logistically possible is another story, but I do think Hawks wanted to try and do that. But it's like, yeah, Twice being like, Twice wasn't going to go along with him because that would mean abandoning his friends, abandoning the League of Villains, the people that took him in. And in his flashback with the deal with Overall, he's like, he took responsibility because one of his friends was hurt and one was killed. And so he's like, I did it again. He's like, I brought this guy into the fold and I trusted him and it was all a mistake. And so you get where Twice is coming from, that he feels like, I carelessly brought this guy in and because of me, and it transitions from Overhaul to Hawks. He's like, because of me, my friends are in danger. And he's like, not again. And just him sitting there crying. Because yeah, he's like, basically, because of me, my friends are in danger. He's like, I brought them here. And now Toga and Compress and Shigaraki, they could all be killed. And it's all my fault. And so you get why Twice is so upset, but God. And then he realizes, he puts it all together. He's like, wow, you know a lot about the Liberation Army. And he goes back to Hawks lying. I wanted to fly freely. That wasn't where I belonged. And we transition back to Hawks looking so menacing. And it's so crazy because the darkness and the shadows surrounding by Hawks, it makes him look like the bad guy. And he's like, I thought I just had to trust you. And then we cut back to, like, we get all of Twice's psyche in this and why he does the things that he does. And so he tells the handler, he's like, what should a guy at the end of his rope do? And he's like, be trusted. And he's like, by who? And he's like, by the Nakama. And that's not bad advice. He's like, if you're at the end of the rope, you need to find people. Don't be alone. Like, that's the whole point. He's like, if you're at the end of the rope and you think there's no hope for you left, don't give up. Just don't be alone. Find friends. Like, make friends. Find people to take you in. He's like, don't give up. And I love that scene because it's like, yeah, if you're someone that's in that situation, yeah, don't be by yourself. Right? And he's like, don't worry. And he's like, because you see Twice kind of slump back when he says that, like, well, who am I going to trust? Who am I going to find to be my friend? Who would be friends with a person like me? And the handler, he's like, don't worry. He's like, there are more people like you than you think. And that's what led him to the League of Villains. He's like, there's people that'll take you in. Because the heroes wouldn't. Back in season 3, at the end of season 3, when we first met Twice, it was a really good conversation kind of about hero society. And that line that Twice says it's always stuck with me ever since that episode. The line of, heroes only save the good people. And that line has always stuck with me in this series because, yeah, in this series, if you are deemed as unworthy, you are discarded. And that's not realistic to our own world entirely. It is in some regards. I won't say that it's not, but I think that it's a really good commentary by Horikoshi that oftentimes people that have mental illness or people that have, a bad upbringing or that have had a bad home life, that have kind of fallen through the cracks, they are often ignored by society or treated as something negative. And it's a brilliant commentary on, like, well, if you guys are heroes and you're supposed to save everyone, what do you do for these people? Are you saving them? Do you even know how that works? Do they even know how that works? So I feel like Twice is a perfect embodiment of someone that needed to be saved. And everyone in society kind of gave up on him until he found the League of Villains and found people like him that took him in because they understood and could relate. And it's hard. But yeah, but he's like, I thought that if I didn't trust you, that it'd be too sad. He's like, he thought that Hawks was like him. He's like, I know what you feel like, Hawks. And he's like, I felt like I needed to trust you because it would help you and it would help me. So, and then to have that betrayal is just like such a blow to Twice, where he's like, it's not, it's like, that's what I thought. And you can tell that Hawks knows that Twice is a good person despite it, right? He knows that Twice is a good person despite it. It's just, we'll talk some more in the spoiler corner about it. But he's like, he knows Twice is a good person. But he's like, thanks for telling me your side of the story. He's like, you were just unlucky. And that shot of Hawks, like with Twice there in the shadows with the feathers towards him. I feel like at that point, I'm going to take a screenshot of that. That might be the thumbnail. I feel like at that point, that's what gets Twice, is when he said, you were just unlucky. And he's like, excuse me? And he thinks back to like himself, talking to himself, being like, did I make a mistake? And he says, well, if you did, well, it was that you were born without any luck. And he thinks back to himself, telling himself that if you made a mistake, it's because you were born unlucky. And Hawks just reaffirmed that. Mm-hmm. And so then this line, I remember everybody getting all worked up about this line: atone for your crimes and start over. Okay, well, that's a great sentiment, Hawks. But I remember even reading the manga, being like, trying to play devil's advocate and being like, oh, can Twice start over? Can he really? Okay. And I was like, that's a bold assumption, Hawks. Because he says no one is working to help his buddies is a bad guy. Hawks says, oh, I'll help you do it. He's like, I'll help you start over. He's like, I'll help you start over. And because you're a good person. And that's the thing that goes back to that line, the heroes only save the good people. And so I can understand why Twice would be so offended by that. Because he's like, oh, I'm a good person, so you'll help me start over? What about Toga? What about Compress? What about Shigaraki? What about those that had this bad time and they're just like me and fell through the cracks? Are they not good people? Do they not get a chance to start over? You know, you can kind of see a little bit of the hypocrisy there, right? And it's funny because Twice kind of points it out. He's like, how do you get to decide that I'm unlucky? Who gave you the right to decide? He's like, you don't understand. He's like, you say I'm a good person and I'm worthy to start over. But people like Toga, who showed kindness to me, who showed that they are capable of kindness, they're not worthy to start over? Is that what you're saying? So you kind of get where Twice is coming from. That he's like, yeah, you're going to take me and rehabilitate me, supposedly, to use my talents to help bust the people that took me in when you all wouldn't. But you're only taking me in because I have a pretty good ability that I could be used for. Is that it? Like, that comes across it. And there is some sincerity to what Hawks is saying. But man, is it a loaded statement to say, oh, I'll help you start over. I'm like, that's a bold statement to make. Like, one, you're going to take him into custody. I'm like, one, how are you getting out there with just Twice and not helping out anybody else during this whole battle? How are you doing that? And then two, he's like, so you're saying that the government that you work for is going to let Twice on the streets? That wasn't going to happen. I felt like Hawks saying that is such like, just to get him to comply and come along. Because I'm like, Hawks, you know good and well that the Hero Commission is not going to let somebody like Twice, who I could just see the Hero Commission saying, well, he has this personality disorder. We can't trust him. He could like have this mixed up personality and hurt someone. He's killed people in the past. He's been a murderer. No, we're not going to let him back on the streets. They were going to take him into custody. And if anything, they were going to lock him up in Tartarus in maximum security and never let him out again. I'm like, Hawk's saying that. I remember reading that in the manga being like, they're not letting him back out once they catch him. They're going to keep Twice like in a padded room, like All for One, and never let him out because his power's too great. It's too dangerous. And his personality is too unpredictable for the Hero Commission to deal with. And so Hawk's saying that he'll help him. It just feels very hypocritical and it feels very patronizing. And I totally get where Twice gets pissed off and he's like, well, how am I worthy of help, but none of my friends are? What gives you the right to say that I'm a good person, but they're not? He's like, I've killed people just like them. Like, what's the difference? Is it because my power is great enough that it can be of service to you? You know, you see all these different things coming from that one statement. I remember people in the manga having a field day with that, just being like, are you joking? But yeah, and so that's what he says, shut up. He's like, is this what heroes do? Yeah, and Hawks, you can tell, and when Hawks looks down and his eyes are shielded, he says, stop. It's like Hawks knows. Hawks knows that it's full of just hot air. He knows it's a hollow statement, but he's just trying to like work it out. But even Hawks knows that he's going to have to kill Twice. And I think Hawks is trying to avoid it at all cost. And I give Hawks this. He tries to avoid it as much as he can. But I think at the end of the day, the moment Hawks walked into that room with the feathers, I think Hawks knew he had to kill him. I think he knew it was going to happen. He was just trying to delay the inevitable and keep it. And then Twice says, what do you mean start over? And he says his name and he's like, no. And then I love he has the thing, so he's like, I haven't cared about myself for a long time. And Hawks is like, I don't want to fight you. And I do believe that. I don't think Hawks wanted to fight him. He just wanted to try to get him to go along. He knew in the back of his head he was going to have to kill him. But he's like, I want you to come along with me. Let's not fight. Let's not do this. But Twice is like, I've not cared about my own well-being for a long time. He's like, I gave my heart and soul to the people around me that took me in. And that's a big statement with Horikoshi that he's making. He's like, you saying that you can help me start over, that's just convenient for you. It's going to make you feel less guilty saying that you'll help me. It's like, you're just so patronizing, right? He's like, yeah, this is convenient for you, but it wasn't convenient. It's one of those things where a big theme in this series is people needing to be saved and who falls through the cracks. Like Shigaraki is a prime example of a character that needed to be saved as a child and the world ignored him because his power seemed disturbing, right? That they didn't want to mess with it. And so they left him on the street. And that's where All for One found him. And so Twice is just saying, yeah, he's like, you wouldn't help. He's like, you heroes wouldn't help me back in the day when I needed help, when I needed rehabilitation. But now that I'm a threat, you're just going to make it convenient for you to like help me now and offer me assistance. When back before when I was a petty criminal, I wasn't worth your time. It's like, yeah, no, it's kind of, he's not wrong, right? And then of course there's the argument, well, Twice shouldn't have killed people. Totally right. He shouldn't have. But there is like the hypocrisy points out here. It's like, yeah, no, it's not wrong. And Hawks knows it. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but Hawks knows that there's a hypocrisy in the system. And he's like, but what can he do? What can he do? He's like Twice. He's like, I have friends and society that I have to protect just like you. So he's like, we're at each other's throats. We've reached an impasse. It's like, if you're not going to go along with me, I'm not going to go along with you. We can't leave this without solving the problem. What's the solution? And Hawks is like, I don't want the solution to be to kill you, but what can I do? What can I do? God, it's great. And he's like, for the sake of everyone else's happiness, he's like, I would sacrifice myself for the sake of everyone else. And that's kind of the tragic gray area of it, is that he kills that hero at the end to save Twice and Compress, to save Toga and Compress. He kills that villain, that hero at the end. And it's a horrible act, like he murdered him and his justification. But then you compare, it's like he killed that hero to save the people he cared about. And Hawks kills Twice to save the people he cares about. So he's like, where does that leave us? It's just death and destruction, right? Oof. So meanwhile, we're just gonna leave that for a moment. It's fine. And go to Fat Gum and getting Tokiyami. And I always wondered why Tokiyami was sought out first in this moment from Fat Gum, and I figured it was for two reasons. One, because Fat Gum knows of Tokiyami through Hawks. He knows that he's a good like student and should be hero. And so he's like, you'll be helpful because you're Hawks' protege. And two, because he knows of his ability. And Dark Shadow is a very good ability that can be long range to go into a space like underground. And it's in the darkness, so it gets even stronger. So he's like, I'll take you underground. Your power's gonna get stronger when we go down there. It'll be perfect. And so it makes sense why he calls him over there. And he's like, there are tons of enemies underground, and we've closed off all of the other exits, so they can only go out through the main passage. So this way, we've got him cornered. He's like, the entrances have been sealed off except for these, so we're fine. And I can't help it. Every time I hear Tokiyami's voice now, I just hear Reiner from Attack on Titan. I just hear Reiner's voice. I can't help it. It's great. I'm like, oh. And so we see like these other Liberation Front members. I like the one lady. I said she had an apple in the episode, but it's more like a red marble. It's great. And then Sun Eater. Let's establish the fact that Sun Eater ate horse meat. Not that that's a big deal. I actually think it's kind of funny. I'm from the US, and in Western culture over here, eating horse is quite taboo. You just don't do it. But I've had a lot of students in my English classes write about how horse meat's actually pretty well accessible internationally and globally. So a lot of other countries eat horses and they're like fine with it. So I find it funny that he ate horse. It's like, oh, he ate that. And it looks like he has like a pineapple. Yeah, he ate pineapples and horses. I'm like, just Chimera Centaur. I love it. And just the idea of him using pineapples as like a mace. It's great. He's like, please stay still for now. And he's like, so cool, say it again. And then he's like, no! I just like how easily embarrassed Tamaki is. Bless his heart. I love Tamaki. He's so sweet. He's like, leave me alone. And so Fat Gum's like, you go all out. I'll keep him, like, I'll use my body as a shield. Show me what you got. Okay, so we're going to talk about this moment here with Redestro versus Ragnarok. In the manga, because I know a lot of people watching this anime may be like, wow, that was a really quick matchup. No, it was insanely quick in the manga. I remember a lot of people getting really pissed off reading the manga because they were expecting this giant, massive fight against Redestro and Tokiyami. They were expecting this big, giant thing. And in the manga, it was like 3 pages. And then that's exactly what happens. His metal leg snaps, and it causes him to fall apart. His metal leg snaps and he gets yeeted through the gate into the hidden passage. And then Dark Shadow comes instantly back. He's like, no. He's like, Fumikage, there's something bad. We can't go down there anymore. And yeah, it's the monster. It's the monster that's just waiting to be woken up. With the little radio. I can't remember his name. God, I can't remember his name. But yeah, he's basically the giant. Is it Giganta? Oh God, no. Gigantus. Oh God, I can't remember. He's this big Titan-looking creature that's just waiting for All For One to give him the signal, right? Yeah, but in the manga, everybody was kind of mad because I remember a lot of people were complaining that the Redestro matchup against Tokiyami was like 3 pages and that was it. But I was like, it makes sense that his metal leg gives out. It logistically makes sense, so I'm not mad about it. I thought it was handled really well in the adaptation here. It looked cool for the 30 seconds that we got. Right? And so I do like that Tokiyami's like, wait, how do we know this information about him? How do we get this intel? Who's supplying this? How do we have so much detail? And Fat Gum says, well, Hawks found out during his investigation. And I like Tokiyami's like, Hawks? Oh, he knows this? I love how cute he looks. Tokiyami looks really cute in this episode. And then, yeah, we have the Fat Gum taxi. Yes, I love the Fat Gum taxi. Where he's just like running and Tokiyami's like a little baby bird inside of him. It's freaking cute. It's so cute. He's like, who'd have thunk that I'd be acting as a taxi? Now, I thought in the manga that Tokiyami was there as well. Maybe. And he's like, where's Hawks? He's like, I don't know. Somewhere in the middle of this melee. Yeah, just bring up Hawks now. He's somewhere. We're not exactly sure where, but he's around. It's fine. And then, yeah. And then we cut back. And then Tokiyami is like, I'm going to become a stronger hero so I can make Hawks proud. Meanwhile, we cut back to Hawks and Twice. And Twice is like, I'll take responsibility this time and face you myself. And he tells him to die. He's like, I'm not giving up. And then the Sad Man's Parade, where they're all there. In the manga, it looks beautiful. And it looks fine here, too. And then Hawk's just crushing through them. Like, slicing through. He's like, you've made so many doubles that he's like, they're not very durable. They're instantly... He's like... And so then Hawks is like, look, I've come this far. And there's some truth to this where Hawks is like, I've had to betray you. He's like, I liked you Twice. He's like, I didn't want to do this. But he's like, I've come this far. I'm not going to let emotions cause me to make a mistake. And that's such a big point in this episode, is that you have Twice and Hawks, two characters who get very emotional in this, right? Like Hawks trying to vie for Twice to have a way out, and Twice getting very emotional and taking responsibility and being like, no. And on the one hand, you can argue, they're like, well, if Twice had just complied and came along with Hawks, he wouldn't have had to die. But then you could also argue and be like, how would that have even worked? He probably would have been killed anyway. The Hero Commission was not going to let him live. Like, you could argue it back and forth. But the fact that Hawks says, I'm not going to let my emotions get in my way. He's like, I'm going to discard my humanity for a moment so I can kill him. And that's what it really comes down to. And I think that it's an interesting comparison because you have a character like Deku, our main protagonist, who is all about saving everyone. And I'm like, would Deku kill someone? Would he do it? Would he go to Hawks' level? Or would he try to save them no matter what? We'll see, right? We'll see. He's like, if you'd have come with me quietly, we still could have done something. I did like you. And Twice is like, bullshit if I came quietly. He's like, these guys are my friends. They didn't betray me. Which is true. They did not. Yeah. He's like, they don't just barge in like that. He's like, your friendship isn't real. It was never real. He's like, you say you like me, but he's like, you don't understand me. And so, yeah, you kind of get where Twice is mad about it. And he just keeps moving forward. He's like, it's no use, scum, you scummy bastard. He's like, taking down villains as quickly as possible. He's like, why do you think I do that? And so now we get to the idea that the reason why Hawks wants to take people out so quickly is he's like, I don't want to give the ones who can't give up a chance. They're the most terrifying for heroes. And he tries to measure Hawks so that he can imitate him, right? He's like, from experience, I've seen that those with strong wills won't lose consciousness. It's so hard. It's so hard seeing this shot because it's so beautifully animated, but I'm like, damn it. Hawks, like him slicing Twice before he can get a measurement. He's like, that's why. And I love that he has the feathers as the sword. He has like one against his throat and one up like that. That's so good. He's like, since neither side will give up, all that's left is to kill. And I'm just waiting for like Deku to have the response to that, because that seems like in Hawks' mind, he's like, we only have 3 options, right? And he's like, he's like, you can't be called heroes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because Twice is like, you're no different than me. He says, you think that he's like, if both sides can't get along, then all there's left to do is kill. And he's like, well, not in all instances, but he's like, in some regards, that's kind of true for us too. So are you really heroes? Are you really that different from us? And there's an obvious answer to that. I know everybody in the comments would be like, well, hero society is for the betterment of people and blah, 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 blah. And there's all that. But there is like a bit of truth to his statement. And he's like, it's always like this. Now, at this point, when Twice says everyone always abandons the down and out, you could argue that, well, no, Hawks wasn't trying to abandon you. And we'll talk about that in the spoiler corner. I don't want to say any more, but there is some like, I can see where you could disagree with Twice's statement there that everyone always abandons the down and out. That's not always the case. The thing about My Hero is you can't deal in absolutes like that, because there are exceptions to the rule, right? There are exceptions. And again, spoiler corner, we'll talk more about it. I'm afraid I'll spoil something if I bring any more up about it here. But yeah. And Hawk's just looking at him like, well, that's not true. And so he's like, Toga was really kind. And he's like, so again, he's like, how can you say I'm a good person but not acknowledge those others? Are you going to save them too? Or is it just me? And he's like, but that's fine. He's like, I just want to protect everyone's happiness. He's like, I want to protect everybody, and you're not going to do that. And so Hawk's like, I'll let them know. And I'm like, no, you won't. No, you won't. You weren't going to. And then that's when Dobby shows up. I'm not joking. I may get a big bowl of chicken wings for next episode and eat them because I'm like, hot wings time. Do I ship Dobby and Hawks? Mm-hmm. Do I ship them because of this episode and possibly the next episode? Mm-hmm. I'm so excited. It's like, I will say, there's something that's just like, seeing Dobby like have the boot to Hawks' face. There's something about it. Something about it. It's like the meme, I hope this doesn't awaken anything in me. He's like, oh, I heard. You didn't notice me, did you? Dobby is such a brat, and I love him. You were distracted by your emotions. Again, that's the thing where Hawks is like, I'm not going to let my emotions get in the way and compromise my intentions and what I have to do. And then Dobby's like, you were distracted by your emotions and you let them get in the way and keep you from doing things. And it's like, But yeah, villain, Dobby, I love it. He's like, you made a mistake, hero. He's such a diva. What a brat. And then he looks over to Twice and he's like, oh, Dobby. And he's like, Twice, you didn't do anything wrong. It's always the heroes who are in the wrong. Which again, always like that, those absolute terms, right? You can't really rely upon them, right? They're not always true. So Dobby dealing in extremes as well. And he's like, right, I do love the blue flame effects. Like they make Dobby look really good in this episode. And then Hawk's like getting Twice out of the way. The animation's so good there. I love that animation. It's great. Oh, it's so good. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you've lost all your weapons. I've burnt your feathers. Yep. And yeah, they're just all a crispy crumble. He's like, you were about to burn your friend up too. And he's like, oh, it's fine. Heroes are known for being able to save lives in an instant. So yeah, Dobby very much was like, oh, I knew you weren't going to let Twice just die then. Which is a funny thing because it's like, if he had just left Twice to burn, that would have solved his problem. He wouldn't have had to kill Twice. So it is curious that Hawks, who has seemed to know this entire time that he was going to have to kill Twice, still tried to save him up to the end. So you have to give Hawks that. Like, he still tried to save him from burning to death. Even though Dobby was like, if he burns, he burns. Like, Dobby kind of gaslights Twice a bit in this. Because Dobby's like, I don't think Dobby truly cares about Twice. Not like Toga and Compress and the others. Dobby doesn't care about anybody. Dobby is only out for himself. He doesn't give a shit about anybody. He's just there because the League is going to get him what he wants. And so, it's interesting. But yeah, I don't think Twice would have been kicked out of the way by Dobby at all. I think he would have killed him and not thought twice about it. But he knew Hawks was going to save him. He's like, isn't it ironic? You're acting like you already knew that I'd betray you. And yeah, Dobby's like, I didn't trust you from the start. Which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. He's like, I just let you pull on this ruse and I kept watching over you. And Hawks is like, I did so much to gain your trust. And he's like, yeah, it didn't work. And he's like, yeah, thanks for doing that. I love you can see the curtains in the background that are like in blue flames. It's great. I'm not as strong with burnt feathers. And this is the worst quirk matchup for me. We're in a cramped space. Yeah, Hawks is like, I can't fly away. I'm in a cramped space. I'm a bird trapped in a cage, and there's fire all around me that I can't defend from. He's like, this is not a good matchup. Not good. And he's like, I've hit the jackpot. And so, yeah, he's like, I've weakened Twice, though. And so he does make a note that he's like, I avoided his organs and cut his bones and muscle. He's like, so he could still be... So at this point, you could argue that Hawks has not dealt any fatal blows to Twice. He's just tried to incapacitate him to where he can't keep moving, right? And so he can take him into custody. So you could argue that Hawks was still trying to get... Yeah, he said, I'm going to carry him out of here. He was still trying to get Twice out to save him. But then Twice takes the handkerchief that Toga gave him, and he tells Dobby, because at this point, Twice does not hear what Hawks is thinking. He doesn't hear Hawks say, I'm going to carry him out of here and get him out of here. He doesn't know that. So at this point, he still thinks Hawks is trying to kill him. Because Hawks has said he's going to kill him. So it's like, when he tells Dobby to burn him, it's like, of course he would, because he doesn't know Hawks is still trying to save him and get him out of there. And of course, Dobby's like, yes, I will gladly burn him. Absolutely. So yandere. And then he's like, go on. I love that he's like, go on twice. He's like, with just one of you, we could stop all of the other heroes. He's like, get out of here, go wild, help the others. Everyone's waiting for you. And this part here, where he does the handoff with him and then tries to go out. And Dobby, of course, doesn't realize that Hawks like jumped out of the window and worked his way back around. Yeah. And Dobby's like, oh my God. Yep, he got out, came back around the other way. And he had just enough feathers to fly out. And he's super fast, right? He's faster than he should be. And then he says, Kigo Takami. Yep, Yep, and that distracts him just enough. And Hawk says, how does he know my name? Because, yeah, up until now, we have not heard Hawks' name. How does he know it? Because it makes sense if he's been working as a double agent for the Hero Commission. They would want to keep him, like, not under witness protection maybe, but at the same time keeping his name a secret so he can't be traced because he's a secret agent, right? If you're a spy, you don't want your real name coming out. So he's like, how does Dobby know? Who is this guy? Mm-hmm. And then, oh God, twice. This part was animated beautifully, where he looks down and sees all the villains fighting and the heroes fighting and recalls Dobby's words and is like, yeah, I can go protect. He's like, I have to protect everyone. Which is like such a sentiment that you normally have for a hero, right? Because villains usually in stories are considered to be very selfish characters. They're doing things for selfish reasons, like Overhaul. But even Overhaul, Horikoshi does a good job of making the villains not necessarily selfish entirely. Like even Overhaul was doing things to help his old man out. I mean, there's a selfishness to it, of course, but there was an ulterior motive as well, even though what he was doing was horrible. And I'm not justifying what Overhaul did, but the things he was doing was not solely for a selfish reason. And in Twice's case, Twice is like the most selfless villain of the entire series, right, at this point, because he's like, I'm doing none of this for myself. He's like, I know I'm broken. I know that I'm not redeemable, but I know that people took me in and gave me a home and were my friends and accepted me for who I am. Wasn't Hero Society doing it. They accepted me and took me in. So he's like, I owe everything to them. So Twice is like, everything I'm doing, none of it is for my own personal gain. It's all for the sake of the people that cared about me. And it's a heavy, heavy episode, right? And he's like, protect them Twice. And then he sees Toga and Compress down there. He's like, you're friends. And it's such a hero statement. He's like, protect the Nakama, right? And you think it's a hero, like a hero rallying cry. He's like, don't pay them back for accepting you by causing them trouble. And in that shot, God, where he's like about to go and he's like, and he goes to like make the double and everything. And he sends the one clone out. Oh my gosh. And then we see Hawks over him. We see Hawks over him with the sword, with the feather sword. Oh my God. That is it's a beautiful image in the blue flames. Oh, and then the blue flames. And you see the little spurt of blood. Yep. I remember that was actually the end of a chapter, and everybody was like, well, it was almost the end of a chapter. You saw it, and then you saw Toga and Compress getting taken. The end of this episode was the end of the chapter. And then, of course, Toga's like, oh, you saved me. And then we find out that this was the last. When he says, like, it feels like you're trying to hold in a poo, I was like, even down to his last moments, Twice is hilarious. But God, it is really emotional when he like goes towards her. And I honestly shipped Twice and Toga for a long time, reading the manga and watching the anime. I've shipped Twice and Toga for so long because even though there's like an age difference there, he was always very kind to her. And like in the last season, he like took care of her to like make sure she had got the blood transfusion, that her body was safe. Like Twice is so respectful of Toga and so kind to her and like called her cute and everything. And I always kind of shipped them together. So then in this moment where he like is lamenting, and he gives her the handkerchief back, but it's a duplicate. And you see the real handkerchief is beside his hand, and there's just blood everywhere. He wasn't able to give her the real handkerchief back. It was all just a double. And man, I will say, compared to the manga, they really give you there's no guesswork of if Twice is dying or not. No, there's the flames, and then there's just the blood just coming down the banister. No, he got killed. Hawk stabbed him. I must look real pathetic and meaningless. Yeah. And then as that blood drops, she grabs the handkerchief, and it just becomes like just mush. And he's like, I can't double anymore. Like his last, he's like, looking for myself, wandering around. I'm sorry for everything until the end. I was blessed with friends I could put above myself. And she says Jin, like she calls out his first name. And that moment where she grabs him as he's like dissolving, and she says, thanks for saving me. Yep. I couldn't have asked for a better life. And then when he tells Hawks to die, this last line that he says, die Hawks. Because he says, why do you get to decide that I was unlucky? I was happy to be here. Oh, and that's the episode. And then they show us that image of the two of them. Like, we not only get to see the two of them dancing, but then we get to see her, like, with the handkerchief, and then her all alone. Oh, my God. But yeah, that line, who do you get to decide if I was unlucky or not? Like, what does that mean to you? Oh. R.I.P. Twice. Twice was definitely my favorite of the League of Villains. And so seeing him die in this, oof, it's hard. And he's like the heart and soul of the League of Villains. So without that, But man, I do have some spoilers I want to talk about, but yeah. I may have to wait till around lunchtime next weekend to watch this next episode and just get myself a bowl of hot wings, because we still got Dobby versus Hawks upstairs, right? And so I'm going to eat those while watching the episode, clearly. But yeah, I've got some spoilers I want to talk about concerning this episode, and so if you want to stick around for those, that would be great. But I've like literally talked for an hour, so worth it though. This episode was worth it, right? So, in the meantime, if you're not sticking around for spoilers, it's not going to be a lot of spoilers, but I do want to talk about some. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next week with more My Hero Academia. This episode, oh my God, I can't believe we're already here. I'm like, we're only 3 episodes in and we're already to Twice's death. I feel like we're going to just have Hawks versus Dobby in the next episode, and then is Tokiyami going to come in and save him in the next episode, or are they going to wait till the episode after that? I'm like, I can't believe we're already getting to this. They're already building up to Shigaraki getting out of the tube, which that I feel like that may be a couple episodes on further. Oh my God. The OP transitioning from Dobby in the Rain to Hawks to Twice. Stroke of genius. I love it. So this episode, I thought they did really well. It felt like it was so quick and the pacing was so fast getting through Twice and Hawks' moments. I wanted to savor them because I felt like when we read the manga, we had those weeks to savor all those panels and all those illustrations. But at the same time, in context of the story, it does happen very quickly. So I thought animation-wise, the voice acting with Hawks and Twice, so good. Like, I thought that voice acting was phenomenal, especially from Hawks. I thought his voice acting, like, you could feel the pain in his voice, like he didn't want to kill Twice, but he was like, and you felt the pain with Twice's voice. Dobby being such a sassy bitch. I'm like, I'm ready. My hot wings moments are coming up, and I almost got confused, right? Because I was like, wait, does he reveal his name now? But he does. I was thinking of the big, giant blackout bubble that happens when Dobby's like, oh, I know this because I'm... And then we don't hear it. I'm really excited for that. I hope we get that. I don't know if we're going to get that next episode or if it's going to be the week after that we get the big blackout bubble moment. I'm so ready, but I'm really curious if we're going to get that or not. But I'm really curious about that, so that's going to be interesting to see if we actually get it or not. But yeah, him saying Kigo, saying his actual name, like, and they made it happen so quickly. I was like, oh, that was a big deal in the manga, him saying his name. So I'm wondering if other reactors watching that have not read the manga and know how much of a deal that is that Dabi knows his name. I wonder if they're going to gloss over that. I haven't watched anybody else do reactions to this series for this season. I know Semblance of Sanity are going to wait till later to do it. So I'm like, I'm going to definitely want to watch their reaction to this episode because I know they like Twice and I know they like Hawks. So I'm going to be like, how y'all going to handle this episode? Because if you're a Hawks and Twice fan, this episode is rough because then you're like in Ruffsville being like, which I like both characters, but I may have empathized a little bit more with Twice at this point in the story. I think I can empathize with Twice because he's dying. And so if his character had lived, I think it would have been harder, right? But here's the thing that I was like trying not to spoil the whole time earlier in the episode, and it's the fact that Twice is talking about, being a good person, or Hawks talking about being a good person, helping him start over. The thing about it is that Hawks is an exception to the story, right? Hawks is an exception to the story. And the scary thing about it is, and the tragic thing about it is that Hawks was someone who came from a family that had a really bad upbringing. Like his dad was a thief and his mom was kind of like off, she was kind of off and like had some hysteria. And Hawks comes from a very bad home life. And sort of the ironic like deviousness of it all, and kind of what's kind of gross about it all with Hero Society is that, yeah, Hawks was a hero. He became a hero and was kind of lifted up out of that bad life. And you could argue that he was saved by the Hero Commission and given this good life and was turned into a hero and given the chance to help others. And so he beat the system, right? And that's kind of like, on the one hand, you could say like, well, Hawks is an exception to the rule because he beat the system. He had this bad upbringing in home life, but he got over it and became a hero. So you can too, Twice. But here's the rub of that. Hawks only became a hero and was only lifted up out of the state of awful that he was born into because he has a good quirk. Because he had a quirk the Hero Commission could use. That's the deviousness of it all. If Hawks didn't have a good quirk, would he have been saved by the Hero Commission? No, they would have left him in the dinge and dirt like everyone else. But because he had a quirk, they were like, oh, this would be powerful for us to use. That's why Hawks was saved. And I think Hawks knows that, right? But the thing about Hawks that makes him a little bit different despite all of that is that Hawks was motivated because he thought Endeavor was a hero. And he thought Endeavor was his hero, and Endeavor basically took his dad away, imprisoned him, which helped his mom and helped, get out of that state. And Hawks is like, feels like he's indebted to Endeavor because of it and wanted to be like Endeavor and save people. So Hawks had someone that did save him. It wasn't the Hero Commission, because if Hawks didn't have a good quirk, the Hero Commission would not have saved him anyway. So I don't think that the one who saved Hawks was the Hero Commission. I think it was Endeavor. Endeavor inspired him to become a hero. And so Hawks had someone like that to look up to, which is the irony of all ironies, right? Because as we find that out in the series, that Hawks looks up to Endeavor so much, it's like Endeavor's own family is such a tragic mess and so awful, but yet Hawks is inspired by him and he was a hero to him. It's the craziest thing. I'm like, Horikoshi, you're writing. But yeah, it's funny that all of that happened. And so Hawks is kind of an exception to the rule, but not because of the Hero Commission, but because of his whole thing with Endeavor. So it's interesting, right? But I wanted to talk about that in the episode, and I was like, I can't say anything because then it'll spoil for all the stuff we find out about Hawks later on, right? But yeah, it's so crazy because Hawks knows where Twice is coming from. He understands having that bad home life and having the world against you. He understands what that's like. But Hawks is like, well, I pulled myself up out of that and chose to become a hero and chose to accept the Hero Commission's offer and chose to do this. He's like, you can too, but there's so much stacked against him. It's such a complicated situation. And I kind of love that about this episode and this part of the manga, is that it really makes you think like, well, unless Hero Society changes some aspects about it, would a character like Twice really be able to be rehabilitated? Would he really? And it brings up a lot of points of discussion, right? I'm really ready for Gigantomachia. That's his name. Thank God, Gigantomachia. That he's gonna come into the fray here. We get a little taste, a little preview of it, and Tokiyami, like Dark Shadow's like, nope, don't want to face that. I am so excited for Tokiyami to help Hawks. I'm so ready for the next episode and the episode after that. I'm so ready because I love this part of the manga. I love Tokiyami coming in. It's a great callback to Hawks. And the funny thing is, Hawks really took Tokiyami under his wing, so to speak, pun intended, because he just felt obligated to, and he really didn't think of himself as a teacher, and Hawks didn't think he made that much of an impact on Tokiyami. He's like, I took this guy in, because I had to. But the reality is he had a huge impact on Tokiyami, and Tokiyami's like, no, he was so inspired by Hawks and wants to become better because of Hawks, that trajectory, like the unknown effect you can have on others, it shows up later in these future episodes when Tokiyami comes in to rescue Hawks, right? Against Dabi. So it's like, who, as we find out, is like the worst matchup for Dark Shadow ever, but he still tries and does it. And it's like, I love that. And the way that they set it up in this episode is such great foreshadowing. It's perfect. Like, I was like, yep, he's going to go help Hawks, and that's what we're going to do. I'm so excited for these next episodes. But yeah, God, they handle the death of Twice. Like, the shadows, the animation, it looks gorgeous. It's beautiful, like the still frames, and then Dabi coming in. Damn. Dabi coming in this moment. It's so good. Like, the flames and everything. And then, God, Dabi just booting his head, and I'm like, oh, Hot Wings. Hot Wings, my ship. And he's just such a bitch. He's like, you didn't notice me, did you? Oh my God. I'm ready for next episode. I am so ready because Dabi is such a brat. And yeah, and God, this is so good. He's like, oh, the way they animate Dabi in this episode with the blue flames has me so excited for Dabi's dance. I'm so ready for it. God. And it's just the most messed up. Like, I love shipping Dabi and Hawks together because there's so many elements to it. You have Dabi and Hawks. You have the hero and villain element, which is obviously classic, right? You have the dark hair and the light hair, even though when we find out later it's really not the case. But the fact that Dabi's father is the inspiration, the Endeavor is the reason Dabi became a villain and the reason Hawks became a hero. And it's poetry. I want to eat it up. I want to like just soak it in and eat it up. That Endeavor is the Endeavor is the reason his own son became a villain, but the reason why this villain's kid became a hero. And it's like the most poetic thing. And I'm like, Horikoshi! It's like it's such good writing and I love it. I'm so ready for Dabi's dance. If y'all couldn't tell, I'm going to fangirl the frick out. People that are anime only are going to be like, why is she getting so worked up about this? I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's been built. I feel like, though, all of us who are Dabi fans, we've known for years that he's Toya. And we've just been waiting for Horikoshi to give us this moment. And so I'm so excited that it's happening. It's going to happen this season. It's happening this season. They prefaced it in the OP with the dance move. It's happening. I'm just waiting for that bottle to come out of his belt and just I'm so ready. I'm so ready. But yeah, him being like, well, you've lost your episode. And Dabi is such a bitch because he underestimates Hawks, being like, I'll just burn you alive, and doesn't take into account that I'm like, you should have backed him up against a different wall without a window. Don't back him up against a window, Dabi. God. But him coming around, like that whole part of Twice against the railing and then having Hawks behind him with the sword. Oh, that was good. That was real good. And then yeah, him rescuing Compact and Toga. That part was animated beautifully, like him just showing like pressing the thing up against her cheek to get the blood off. I do feel bad for Toga in this episode too because she liked Twice a lot. And she's lost a friend. And like the idea of him, like regardless of whether they're villains or heroes, the idea of someone dying in your arms, it's a lot. And Toga is the one character that like, I feel like Toga, she feels like she can't relate to anyone. And Twice was the one person who totally accepted her completely because he felt the same way. And she's lost him. And it's just like, yeah, like the heart and soul of the League of Villains is gone. Oof. God, this episode's good. I may go back and rewatch this episode a lot. I love this episode a lot. I do think that it's called One's Justice, and I think they did justice to the manga here. I know a lot of people will probably complain. They're like, oh, they condensed it into one episode, but they didn't draw it out. It wasn't drawn out. It wasn't slow. The pacing was like, just like the manga. It was fast and furious, and it was emotional. I was like, I feel like a lot of anime only people are going to be like, wow, we're getting all this emotion right here, right now, 3 episodes into the season. I'm like, you have no idea. You have no idea how much emotion's in store. So get ready for that. This is like the beginning of it. I hope that anime only people see why we like this part of the manga so much, because yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg into the emotional overhaul that we're about to have this season, and I'm pretty excited about it. So I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I really did, and I'm really excited to go back and rewatch it and get some screenshots for the thumbnail. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm gonna get myself a bowl of hot wings and be back for next week's episode of My Hero Academia. Bye.